Hey guys, it's Ray, and we are streaming blacksmithing. Today's project is going to be a set of scroll tongs, and this is the set of scroll tongs that I currently own. This was made by a good friend of mine. They have a round pointed nose, just like a set of needle nose pliers. What these are used for is for creating scrolls, the little vinies on your leaves and stuff like that, or like the corkscrew that we made. These tongs are absolutely incredible for that, for starting lovely small scale scrolls. A friend of mine made these ones for me and taught me kind of how to make them. These are the set that I made at the same time while he was showing me how to make the tongs. And these guys are really, really ugly, and I really feel like I want to make another set just to have like a personal redemption. It's kind of like where you started, how it's going, one of those memes. So today we're going to do an identical piece just like this guy. So I have the second piece of steel heating in the forge right now. But once we've got two identical pieces with the reins semi-drawn out, we will be able to kind of clean those up a little bit, give it just a little bit more length, and then we'll start working on the boss. Now, the boss of a set of tongs is the section here where the pivot is and the rivet sits. So it's how they open and close. So we'll isolate that out about here, and then from there, we will start making the jaws of the tongs. We'll draw that down into more of a point section. We're gonna use this as our template today to make the other side, because a set of tongs, each side needs to be identical. We are currently establishing that tip that we want to see. I'm losing a lot of heat from the cold of the anvil. As we continue to work, it'll warm up and it won't suck the heat out as much. All right, and we're starting to get a really good point on this taper. And I think that's actually doing pretty well. Now I'm going to straighten out it a bit because it's starting to curve on me. Makes it a lot easier to continue those tapers when I straighten it out as I go. And I'm going to be keeping our piece really, really hot because since I'm hand hammering, the hotter it is, the further that it will taper in one heat. All right, so we're gonna start back on that taper, or further back on the taper. And these are all full body strikes. With an extra flip of the fingers. So we're getting a decent amount of pressure going on and movement. So we're starting to see a little bit of gains here. The piece itself is growing a little bit. We've got a long ways to go, but we're partially there. I think we've grown maybe a little less than an inch. So we are gonna go back on the horn to draw this down a little bit further. Straighten that out on the flat. Yeah, it's still growing pretty consistently. Looks like maybe, a 1/4 inch each time we do a heat, it almost looks like. So I'm trying to get a lot of meat out of this like back end here, because that's going to give us a lot more length in the long run, is if we can get that, take that meat out, shorten up the boss section a little bit, and bring it down into the reins. All right, we're going to compare these two one more time. We'll see how close they are. It looks like we are close enough. So we are back to establishing a point. This time we are going to be establishing a much skinnier point, because we are starting on the jaws of the tongs. So this needs to be a little bit more precise. We're going to go on all four corners. That way those jaws are evenly squished in from where we have the boss. So back in the fire. So we're really trying to thin this this area a lot, but we don't really want to make any more, or we don't want it to grow in length much more than we have it right now. Looks like we might have to hammer this back a little bit, and that is called upsetting. So we want to hammer that back because we've got a little dimple in that end of the tong. We want to pull that out. We're going to end up getting some cold shunts in there, and it'll crack our tongs, and we don't want to see that. So all right, we are starting to push that material back on itself. Like I said, we're trying to get rid of that dimple that's starting to form. We took out the little divot dimple in there, and hopefully we'll be able to continue with our drawing out and making it skinnier. Back over to the horn. All right, so now what I am doing is I am kind of trying to center the jaws of these tongs where we really want them. We are going to add our second piece into the fire so that it can start heating up as well. We are going to want to create the same shape on the second side. All right, so we've broken that material out at the end. And I gotta be really careful that we don't end up developing another dimple in there. So we're gonna continue to kind of break that material apart, break it down, and kind of isolate an area where we're going to draw down the jaws of our tong. And we're kind of trying to center the jaws over the boss. And that's why I'm hammering on all four corners. Gonna make it a lot easier to handle. So it looks like we have a lot more length over on this side, but we've got a lot more girth on this side. So I think we're still working pretty well. All right, so now we're going to go back to the other piece and we're going to kind of compare and contrast the two again. It looks like we've got them really similar. So we've got two really nice needle nose sections of steel for the round section there. So the next thing I think we're going to do is we're going to start isolating out the boss. So we might actually like cut it off about here and draw all of the rest of this down into the rein. So we've got much more material than we want still for our boss. So we're going to have to continue bringing this taper back. We are going to work on taking a little bit of the meat off of this area. Kind of flattening it out a bit on the flat of the anvil. And kind of smooth out that taper. Alrighty, so we're hanging this piece off of the end, and I've decided that it's going to be this side. We got to be really, really careful that we're not, sliding this all around. So we've got that nice little shelf forming in there. We're really starting to get that back, that really nice looking spine. So for this side, we're going to kind of isolate out where we want our boss to be. Really start developing that shelf, which is really nice right there. As we hammer on this axis, we're actually going to widen that out and thin that up, and that'll help us a lot. So we're going to focus on this side, this heat. And then from here, I think I might actually let this guy cool just a little bit so that we'll have an example. I want to make sure that they're identical. So I'm going to leave this guy here, and then we're going to take a look at the other side and see what we've got, if they're close enough in common. So it looks like we've got a long way to go here, but we've got a lot of meat. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is flip this around and work on it from this edge. All right, so we're going to compare the two again. All right, so we're starting to get that extra length. It looks like we've got about half of that extra length. We've got about 1 inch left here. And then we're really going to focus on the two bosses. All right, as far as length, we've got that. That is pretty close. All right, and then we've got corner to corner. So when the next heat, we're gonna go just like this. So we've got the corner facing the corner. And if I remember that, we'll get that nice diagonal shelf exactly how we want it. All right, so we've kind of started that line in there. You can kind of see it a little bit, a tiny bit, but we don't have a lot of heat. We need to push it back just a hair bit because I don't want the corner to get hung up when we're opening and closing them. All right, so I think we're gonna try and do the corner and corner. And we've kind of got a shelf that's pre-made there that we've got. If you can see that, it's like right there. I am now kind of trying to shape this a little bit so that it's a little bit closer to the other one and that we're kind of correcting a little bit of the lumps and bumps that we had when we were making this. And we are rounding out on all four sides, or all four corners, so that it's a little bit more comfortable to use these tongs. So as I'm doing this, I am looking for the impression that I make. So it takes me a little bit of extra time because I gotta make sure that I don't miss, because if I miss, then I have a really sloppy hole. So you can kind of start seeing the impression that the tool is making every time I hammer. So this first heat will always be a little bit slower than the previous heats, or I mean than the subsequent heats. That is the beginning of a rivet hole. All right, so I gotta find the little curl, like the round area that I had started before, and I can find it, it's right there. So we're gonna keep going. You can really start seeing that a little bit. We pick up the punch and replace it every time until we get to a point where we've kind of got a lip that holds it in place. That way it doesn't walk on us. And we've got a nice clean rivet. When I am looking to use tempered tool steel pieces, like stuff that I've gotten from like, you know, box stores and stuff like that, I tend to use oil to quench those off. And the reason is because oil quenching tool steel is the most common. Now the worst part of this is if you are not incredibly precise with your hammer strokes, it is very, very easy to hit your hand while you're doing this. So, ouch, just like that. Yeah, I hit my hand instead of the end of the punch. So this is kind of one of those things. There is inherent danger in blacksmithing, and you really have to be aware of what you're getting yourself into. You will end up burning yourself. You will end up hammering or like smashing your thumb with the hammer, and it will hurt. So it's kind of like if that is not for you, then you know, just blacksmithing may not be for you. Look at that glow. You can totally see how bright that is. All right, we're making really good progress this heat. We've got a lot of heat in there. So we are actually about halfway through. And because we're about halfway through, what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually put this guy, we're gonna pick him up, we're gonna bring him over to the pritchel hole, which is that round hole on the end of my anvil. We're gonna have that hover over there, and then we're gonna start working on him, because that is going to give us a nice hole and a guideline on the other side of the piece. So you can see now where that pritchel hole has made an impression. All right, so we are back to paying close attention to where the hole has been formed. All right. And when we turn that back over again, it's gonna pucker out and we'll be able to actually see where we've used that. Alrighty, once more. Whew. Alrighty, and we've actually gone all the way through. As you can see, the hole right there, and that's the slug. We will kind of hammer that out a little bit so that just like comes right off. And now that's on the floor. So now we have our hole already punched through there. So what I'm doing here is I am actually hammering off the corners. This edge here, it's a square profile, and what we're doing is we're taking that square down to a octagonal profile. And the reason we want to do this is because from the octagon, we can kind of round out this nose, and then we go from octagonal to round. A lot easier. So here we're kind of straightening out that boss. And the reason that I am using the area around the party hole is because I have that shelf here and that shelf here. And if I use this little section here, it's not going to kind of crush that area. So we'll get a good amount of movement exactly where we want it. So I'm really liking how how straight that's looking today. So I think we're just about ready to kind of grind that smooth. We got a few more minutes and we're going to continue doing work on this side, the same sort of work. Kind of trying to straighten that out a little bit. It looks pretty straight to me. And then if we kind of put these two together like so, kind of ghosting the pieces, so we can kind of see what they'll look like when the rivet's going to go through. It looks like we need to take a little bit of this section off as well. Make sure that it's not gonna bind up. We have our two halves of our tongs completed. So now I'm gonna focus a little bit on, kind of flattening out our boss section so that the two halves will kind of sit together and it'll be, they will move smoothly over each other. So I have the grinder disc on the angle grinder, and we are actually going to start grinding. So lots and lots of sparks. I think overall, I'm pretty happy with how flat that they are. What we're going to do is make the rivet next so that we can use the resistance of the pieces themselves to kind of shape them, if that makes sense. So as always, with every time we're using round stock, we always want to make or flatten out our and create our 4 sides. It helps us make sure that everything is straight and we don't get lots and lots of twisting. So that's what we're going to start with. And then from there, we're going to kind of draw this down just a little bit. And really what we're trying to do is we're just trying to make sure that this piece of steel will go through this hole. So I always have, you know, an example so that I can measure up the rivet with the hole. Still a little bit too big. I'm kind of leaving the edge or leaving the long side over the edge of the anvil, and it's kind of pushing that material down below that corner, and we're actually creating ourselves a little head. So right now, instead of using a very forging, like heavy hits, I'm using real nice taps. And this is really so that we are, you know, kind of making sure that the rivet is nice and smooth, and we're getting rid of all of the imperfections in there, any divots or bumps. And I think we're pretty dang good. So if we do this, or if we, you know, try this one more time, I mean, look at that. That's all nice and smooth. We've got plenty of space for like that head to form. I like that a lot. So we're gonna cut that off. Open and close them. Make them all nice and loose. All right, and they are together. We are good to go. So we're gonna bring the whole thing and put that in the forge. We're gonna have to kind of finesse these so that they'll actually function. So we're kind of tapping because we don't want them to move too far, because if they move too far, then that's going to be bad. All right. So what we're kind of trying to do is we're kind of trying to bring those two together very, very slowly so that they touch. And they're trying to open and close on me a little bit again. So you can see them trying to open and close like that. That's not a bad thing, per se. So I think I need a little bit more heat. All right, look at that. I'm happy with that. I'm really happy with that. Time to quench them off. So look at those. That's beautiful. I like that a lot. Oh yeah. So these are our tongs and they function beautifully. Look how smooth that is. That is so nice. I love that.